If you're new to yoga, maybe you've been practicing at home, or maybe you've never practiced at all, and you're going online, you're searching for yoga studios in my city, yoga studios in my town, and you're getting overwhelmed by all of the different options, and you're not sure if this class is religious, or if this class is too hard, or if this class is too easy, you are not alone. This video is for you. It's called Beginner's Yoga: How to Choose a Class That's Right for You. Hey, my name's Lucas. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm a teacher trainer. Back in 2002, when I started practicing yoga, I was living in New York City, and I did probably exactly what you're doing now. I went online and started searching, and I found so many different styles. I thought, how can there be so many different yoga offerings? And I quickly found out that there isn't actually that many. The vast majority of the market, the vast majority of the classes on offer, whether you're in Sydney or you're in St. Louis or you're in Los Angeles, wherever you might live in the world, the vast majority of the classes can be pretty easily lumped into a few different categories, and I'll do my best to explain those here. One big caveat: for sure, I will leave out some styles of yoga. This isn't meant to be a comprehensive overview of every style of yoga ever. It's meant to give you a comprehensive overview of the most popular classes that you're bound to find in your average yoga studio, gym, or fitness center in your area. Let's start off by talking about Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga. Sri K. Patabi Joyce was a teacher in Mysore, India in the south, and he developed a style of practice that's known as Ashtanga or Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga. And this is a dynamic style of practice, which means the poses flow together very smoothly, and the breath connects the movements, so everything is one breath, one movement. It's pretty fast-paced. In terms of religiousness or spirituality, Patabi Joyce was famous for saying that yoga is 99% practice and 1% theory. So there's not a lot of precision alignment. There isn't a lot of spiritual indoctrination. There is an opening and closing mantra that might put some of you off, and there is often ohms in classes, which again might put some of you off. In terms of accessibility, Ashtanga yoga is probably one of the more challenging, more physically demanding practices. That doesn't mean you should stay away. Beginners are welcome, but just go into it knowing that you're approaching a very, very challenging style of yoga. In modern terms, this is often phrased as a power yoga, power vinyasa, or a flow class. These are common terms you'll find. When you see those on a schedule, very often that is the Ashtanga sequence that's been modified and made a little bit more accessible. And in many cases, the chanting and ohms have been removed, but not always. The next style of yoga I'd like to talk about is Iyengar Yoga. B.K.S. Iyengar was a very, very famous and prolific teacher as well as an author from Pune in India. And Iyengar style yoga is scientific precision alignment. Yoga chairs and blocks and stools, straps, rope walls, everything in between. In terms of the pace of the class, very, very slow. You might do 5 poses in a 1-hour class, so very, very slow and detailed. One way to think about it is like the classic ballet of yoga. That's what Iyengar is. Teachers are very strict, and every pose has precision alignment. If you like all the small details, if you like to know exactly what's going on, if you like to go pose by pose, then this is a class for you. Most Iyengar classes do not have any religious trappings. Usually there's no chanting and no spiritual indoctrination whatsoever. So usually these classes are relatively free from that if that's a concern for you. The next style of yoga that we need to talk about is hot yoga. Hot yoga was founded by Bikram Chowdhury, and Bikram is currently kind of a fugitive on the run. Prior to his crazy life and crimes and things like this, he founded hot yoga. He called it Bikram Yoga after himself, and it was 26 poses and 2 breathing exercises. These 26 poses are static poses. You do a pose, you rest. You do a pose and you rest. The 2 breathing exercises, one in the front, one in the back of the class. The thing that's unique about hot yoga, as you can guess, is the heat. It's practiced in a heated room, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes even hotter, which means even though the poses are relatively simple, the hold times are long, sometimes up to a minute, and the heat makes it really, really intense. So this is simultaneously a very accessible practice and a very, very challenging practice at the same time, which is part of the reason it really boomed in popularity. A first-time student could try every pose and still come out of the class dripping with sweat and having a really great experience. That 26 poses and 2 breathing exercises has been morphed by lots of different schools and studios and teachers. Some of them expanded, some of them have less postures, but the idea is usually the same. Static rather than dynamic poses rest between postures, that heated room, and that intensity. The next style of yoga that we need to take a look at is classic Hatha yoga. The reality is everything that we've been talking about falls under the umbrella of Hatha yoga. Yoga poses and breathing exercises, those are Hatha yoga collectively. But in the vernacular, like when you Google search and you see Hatha yoga, usually what they're referring to is yoga in the style of Swami Shivananda. Shivananda was a medical doctor turned yoga teacher. He wrote like 200 plus books, so he was very prolific and had a very big influence on yoga all around the world, in the East and in the West. He had two very famous students, Satchidananda and Vishnudevananda, who helped to spread his style of yoga all around the world. Satchidananda was even on stage at Woodstock, just to give you an idea. Of all the yoga styles we've talked about, Shivananda style and all the derivatives, things like integral yoga and other classic Hatha yoga styles, probably going to be the most spiritual. Some of them might feel neo-Hindu, for example. You might have devotional prayer or chanting. You might have songs and singing, but every class is usually around 12 postures with rest in between each posture. The class is usually bookended with breathing on both sides, and often again includes chanting, sometimes prayer, and more religiosity than any other styles that we've looked at today. Classic Hatha yoga has many different interpretations, and so just because something says Hatha yoga doesn't mean it's going to be the way that I present it. Hatha yoga is a catch-all term similar to saying cardio. There are lots of different iterations, but very likely, because of the influence of Shivananda, Satchidananda, and Vishnudevananda, very likely you're going to have an experience that's somewhat similar to what I shared with you now. The poses themselves are pretty accessible, meaning most people would feel pretty comfortable getting into a class, even if they've never been to a class before. The next category of classes I call targeted yoga, and this is just a term that I've invented, but this is very much a modern iteration on classic yoga poses, and targeted yoga classes are usually focused on one particular outcome. For example, yoga for PTSD, yoga for back pain, yoga for scoliosis, yoga for anxiety. These classes might be super short supplemental practices, 10 to 15 minutes. They might be long, intensive workshops, but these range everything from extremely physical to extremely metaphysical and everything in between. Of all the categories of classes, this is one of the most fast-growing styles, is using yoga as a tool to solve specific health challenges in your life. The last category that I wanted to chat about is what I call fusion yoga. This is yoga plus dance, Pilates plus yoga, acrobatics plus yoga, and these classes tend to be dynamic, so things move fast. They tend to be very, very physically challenging, meaning of all the classes we've chatted about, along with Ashtanga yoga, probably the level of athleticism and physical challenge probably up there. And they also are very unpredictable. Some of these classes will seem a lot like a yoga class. Some of them might not seem that much like yoga at all. And integrating yoga into other movement practices, again, like targeted yoga practices, have been on the rise for a long time. So what do? You Google search, you take a look, find a studio in your local area, and think, do I want a class that's religious, or is that a no-go for me? Do I want something that's fitness focused? Number two, am I excited by flowing? Do I want to move steadily and dynamically throughout the hour, hour and a half of class? Or do I feel more comfortable with a pose by pose, detailed breakdown with rest in between postures? And lastly, what kind of challenge am I looking for? Do I want something that's really beginner friendly and going to remain pretty accessible? Or do I want to physically challenge myself from an athletic standpoint? And from there, I think it's relatively easy to pick your first class. Keep in mind, whether we're chatting about a very, very challenging Ashtanga class or a very, very accessible classic Hatha class, every studio has beginners every single day, so you shouldn't be intimidated. These studios are set up and designed for people like you. So sign up for a class and go. Now, many of you are thinking, hey, YouTube, there's a whole bunch of free videos here. Why don't I just practice from home? I would recommend you do that. Home practice is amazing, but there's something magical that happens when you get in community. We will always work harder when other people are around us. We will always rise to the occasion, whether it's a work scenario, a social scenario, a fitness scenario, a mind-body health scenario, even internal work. We all do better work when we're in community. I don't know why, it just is the human experience. So I would encourage you, if at all possible, to take in-person classes. Many studios have intro specials, which means for the first week or the first month, it's a discounted rate. This is also a great way to try different studios and figure out what's right for you. And again, the most important thing is when you find something that does work, forget about everything that I've said and just keep going with that. The best practice is one that you do long term. Let's talk a little bit about preparing for classes in terms of mats and clothes and some safety considerations. When it comes to gear, I usually tell people just go to class and use whatever mats they have at the studio, rent a mat or borrow a mat, because mats are very personal. I use these Kurma mats. They're from Germany, Kurma with a K, and I like them a lot because they're really, really durable, high quality, and they're pretty affordable. There are yoga mats that cost about $150. It seems a little bit excessive, especially when you have about 5 of them like I do. But whatever mat you use is just fine, but do get a yoga mat, not a fitness mat. The mats they have at the gym, they're often too squishy and they're often too short. These are about 180 to 200 centimeters, and they're designed for yoga, so they won't slide around and they won't squish like a fitness mat or like a camping mat. In terms of clothes, the most important thing is don't wear pajamas, don't wear sweatpants, don't wear baggy clothes. Form-fitting clothes will make you feel more comfortable and they'll make you feel more confident when you're practicing. And these things really do matter. In terms of what brands or styles, totally up to you, but I would not wear fisherman pants and I wouldn't wear like orange robes like you'll see on the internet when people are doing yoga. Those fisherman pants will fall off and you'll have a wardrobe malfunction in the middle of class. The clothes will get sweaty and they'll stick to you, so I would avoid that. Form-fitting, lightweight clothes is usually the way to go. Lastly, I wanted to chat about a couple of safety considerations. And before we get into that, it's really important to understand that yoga is safe. How do I know this? Because I have insurance for studios, for myself, for teachers, for graduates all around the world. And insurance is very inexpensive, which means the actuaries, the math people, they've done the math and they've figured out that injuries are rare and very, very minor in a yoga studio compared to any other activity you could think of. Golf, tennis, ping pong. Forget about sports like football or racquetball. Forget about that stuff. Very, very safe, which means that injuries are very unlikely to happen, and when they do happen, they're very minor. That doesn't mean you can't get hurt. There are 3 things I'd like you to think about specifically: your wrists, your knees, and your lower back. And I'll show you a couple of simple tips now to keep you safe as you practice. No matter what style of yoga you choose for your first class, you'll probably end up in a plank position, a chaturanga, and a downward facing dog at some point. And for some people, this can be pretty hard on your wrists initially. I'd like to give you a couple of tips to keeping your wrists happy during practice, knowing full well that it's still normal to get a little bit of soreness, but this can really make a big difference. When you put your hands down on the mat, I'd like you to think specifically about what we call the naughty knuckle, your first knuckle pressing down into the ground. I'd like you to think about spreading your hand as much as you can and then gripping the floor as if you had a claw with that naughty knuckle down on the ground. Most new students will have trouble getting their knuckle down on the ground. If you struggle, that's okay. Keep working. Within a couple of weeks, you'll find your knuckle down. It'll really help with your wrist alignment. The next thing is your hand positioning. You want to think about either your index finger pointing straight forward, or your middle finger pointing straight forward, or somewhere in between. The way to gauge the angle of your hand is to look at your wrist wrinkle. And what I mean by that is when you put your hands on the ground with either your middle finger or your index finger going forward, look at the wrinkle that your skin makes at your wrist and try to make an even wrinkle. If you're turned out too much, you'll find the wrinkle bunches up to one side. If you're turned in too much, you'll find the wrinkle bunches up to one side. We like to have an even wrist wrinkle with either our index finger, our middle finger, or somewhere in between pointing straight forward, and that can make a really big difference. Next, let's talk about our lower back. In many classes you'll do some variation of a sun salutation. The challenge with sun salutation is if you have tight hamstrings, when you dynamically fold forward, sometimes it can hit your lower back. I'd like to show you a very, very simple way to modify, especially when you're starting out, that can really help to ease that pressure on your lower back. Whatever style of class you're in, when your teacher has you move from a position like this to a folding forward position, just soften your knees ever so slightly, and that'll help to take the pressure off your lower back. As time goes on, as your hamstrings open up, maybe you'll keep your legs straight, maybe like me, you'll soften your knees forever. Totally up to you, but it's a very, very simple way to protect your lower back in the short term. When you hinge forward, soften your knees. The final consideration is your knees. Now, your knees are a really strong joint, but they're a hinge joint. It likes to open and close. It doesn't really like rotation, and this is where you have to be careful. If you're a new student, I want you to be extra careful with any motion where you fully flex your knee and then you work on lateral rotation. Now, eventually, of course, you'll get to a place where this is very comfortable, but initially, even a simple seated position like this can potentially be tweaky on your knees. And by tweaky, I mean if you feel any kind of sharp shooting pain, you back off, modify, use blocks, or ease up. Be particularly careful anytime you flex your knee and rotate. Anytime you flex your knees and rotate. Full flexion and lateral rotation of your hips, that's when you can potentially get into trouble. With those 3 tips, you can do really well. The final tip is anytime you need to, especially during your first 3 classes, take a break. Take a child's pose, let the class keep going, and don't worry. All of us have some challenging times during our first initial classes. You'll get up to speed very quickly. I hope you found this video helpful, and most importantly, I hope you sign up for an in-person class sometime in the next week or so. If you're feeling nervous, if you're feeling apprehensive, again, remember, beginners come to classes every day. I know some of you will write in the comments, hey, you forgot about this style and you forgot about that style, and you're right. There are so many different styles. As I mentioned before, the best style of yoga is the one that you love, the one that you go to most often. So my question for you is down in the comments, what's your favorite style of yoga and why? If you'd like more science-based yoga videos, hit subscribe down below. If you'd like to find my teaching calendar, it's at yogabody.com. And I'll put a PDF reference guide down below to some of the things that we've covered in terms of spiritual, not spiritual, in terms of static or dynamic, and lastly, in terms of challenge, physical challenge of the practices, in case that's helpful. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.